I am Dr. Hanuman Prasad. I am working as an assistant professor in the Department of Chemistry at IARE. The topic I am discussing is gender and biology. This is the continuation of previous lecture. So, in the previous lecture, I am discussing about the social construction of sexuality. And in today's lecture, I will discuss the contents, difference between food and sexuality and corresponding references. So the first content is difference between food and sexuality. Let's look at that content. As we have seen that there are so many similarities between food as well as sexuality. However, there is a difference too. So there are so many similarities between food and sexuality, and there are differences also. So we are going to discuss the differences. The easy way in which we can talk about differences in food is not possible when it comes to sexuality. In terms of food, we can talk the differences easily, but in terms of sexuality, it is not possible to discuss in a very easy way. If a person does not like tandoori chicken and you like it, it might not create much differences between two people. If one person likes one type of food and another person likes the same food or dislike the same food, then it doesn't create much differences between those two people. However, if a person's desire or sexuality is different from the norms decided by the society, the person might have to face severe consequences for it. So the conclusion from this is the inequalities or the different tastes in food doesn't create much problem. But in terms of sexuality, it creates so much problem. That is what I have given here. If a person's desire or sexuality is different from the norms decided by the society, then the person might have to face severe consequences for it. But in terms of food, if a person like tandoori chicken and other person doesn't like it, they won't face severe consequences because that is just food. So it depends on their taste. So that is okay. But in terms of sexuality, so one has to face severe consequences for avoiding the norms decided by the society. So please make a note of this difference. And let's continue the difference between food and sexuality topic. World Health Organization Institute, which is abbreviated as WHO, has given a detailed definition of sexuality. However, it needs to be reinstated that it is a central aspect of our lives. WHO has given a detailed definition of sexuality, but it needs to be reinstated, means it needs to be reproduced. That it is a central aspect of our lives. So sexuality is a central aspect of our lives. It is present in almost all the intricacies of our lives. What are the intricacies? Intricacies means complexities. And it is important to address those intricacies. So what I am mentioning here, sexuality is present in almost all the intricacies of our lives. It is present in all the complexities of our life. And sexuality is important to address all those intricacies that we are facing in our lives. We are presenting you some of the aspects of lives, and you can see how sexuality is present in all these aspects. So some of the aspects are demonstrated here, and you can observe how the sexuality is present in those kind of aspects. Those kind of aspects means intricacies, complexities. So we'll see in the next slide, in the continuation of difference between food and sexuality. Let's see. So with respect to education, I am discussing here for the showing of difference between food and sexuality. So in terms of education, dropout rate of girls after 5th standard is a big issue in our country. So many girls are dropping out. Nowadays everybody is continuing up to high standards also, because now gender sensitization achieved almost. It's not 100% achieved. It is greater than 90% achieved, we can say. So you know that gender sensitization means gender equal society. But in olden days, especially nowadays also, some of the people, remaining 10% people, the dropping out rate of girls after primary school level, after 5th standard, is a very big issue in our country. It is more in the olden days, it is less in the current era. So the higher primary schools, means after 5th standard, the study after 5th standard, are located far from the village in general. So primary schools are available in our village, so where we can study up to 5th standard only. But after 5th standard, we have to go to cities, which is far from our village. So in the context of education, we call it an issue of gender. So this will be coming under gender issue only, because so here one question is asked. So in answer to that question, you will understand how it is an issue of gender. But is it seriously an issue of gender? So as I discussed in the previous line, so since the higher primary schools are located far from the village in this context, so we call it as an issue of gender. Is it seriously an issue of gender? If you talk to these girls' parents, they will tell you that since the schools are located far away from the villages, they are scared that something might happen on their way to school. By something, they mean either sexual violence, or some girls might explore their sexuality. So that is why the girls' parents are scared to send them out of their village, far from their village, for the higher standards, more than 5th standard, higher primary schools. So that is why this is an issue of gender. Obviously, it is an issue of gender. Many boys used to do higher primary schools, used to go higher primary schools and continue their education. But in case of girls, the parents think narrowly in olden times. But nowadays, as I said, 90%, even more than 90% of the people are going for higher education. So for higher education, you should complete up to 10th, means after 5th standard, after primary school, should move to higher primary school. Then only you can go to 10th standard. Then after you can move colleges. So after 10th, you have +1 and +2, 11th and 12th, right? So if they are not allowing to send after 5th onwards itself, then how they allow to send after 10th? So first of all, they have to study up to 10th standard. Then only they have to move to +1 and +2, right? So that is the major issue in olden days. Nowadays also issue, but it is a minor issue nowadays, because almost all the girls are going to cities and out of state, out of districts, even out of countries also, for their higher education, for pursuing higher education. Yes. So this is the issue of gender. especially in the olden days. Very minorly in the current era. Yes. Let's continue to the next slide as the continuation of difference between food and sexuality. So in terms of mobility we are discussing now. So in the previous slide we discussed in terms of education. As I have mentioned, we will present some aspects. So those aspects are these aspects. Means first aspect is education aspect. Second aspect is mobility aspect. Let's see what is this mobility aspect and how this will show the difference between food and sexuality. Women are not allowed to go out at night. Mostly in women hostels, girls are not allowed to go out at night. So everybody know this issue. But why? Why women are not allowed to go out at night especially? So why this issue? Why this mobility issue is there? In some universities, they have started the Pinjra Todd movement. A movement called Pinjra Todd movement. What is this Pinjra Todd movement? Which calls the hostels as Pinjra. So this movement calls the hostels as Pinjra. Pinjra is nothing but jail or prison. So since they are one kind of arrested in their rooms, they are not allowed to move outside, right? So that is why they call it as Pinjra. Pinjra means prison or jail. So this movement is Pinjra Todd movement. Okay. So in some universities, this is the movement that they called. The name of this movement is Pinjra Todd movement because hostels are treated as prisons or jails, which is the meaning of Pinjra. Yes. This also has linkages with sexuality because the authorities are scared that the girls might face sexual violence at night time especially. That is why they are not allowed to go out at night. Because the authorities are scared that the girls might face sexual violence. The authorities will tell you that they are trying to protect the girls. The authorities will tell you that they are trying to protect the girls. But it is not merely a matter of protection. It is not only the matter of protection. It is also the matter of whether they are exposed to sexual violence. That is the fear that the authorities have. But nowadays, I think 50% of this issue is sorted out. Because now everybody is believing that both are equal in this society. So like boys, girls also can move out and they can get their desired things. So 50% of the issue is sorted out, but still 50% of the issue persists. Slowly it will go, it will vanish, but it takes time. That is why gender sensitization is not achieved to 100%. So it has to be achieved still. Yes. So they are scared that, they means higher authorities, they are scared that girls might engage in consensual relationships or sex if they are allowed freedom. So they assume that if they have given freedom, then they might involve in consensual relationships or sexual relationships. So that is the main reason why the girls are not allowed to send outside at night time, especially in the hostels. So let's continue this topic, difference between food and sexuality, in the next slide. Now the next aspect is doctor's treatment. So here I am showing some of the aspects of lives where you can see how sexuality is present in these aspects. The first aspect I discussed is in terms of education. Girls are not allowed to study after 5th standard in the olden days especially because in their villages higher primary schools are not available. They have to move away from the village and it is far from their village. So that is why they are not allowed because of the fear that they might engage in sexual affairs or they might face sexual violence. And second aspect is in terms of mobility. Girls are not allowed to go outside at night, especially in the hostels. So in some universities, they called it as Pinjara Tod movement because they considered the hostels as prisons or jails. So here also the issue is same. The higher authorities think that the girls, if they're given freedom, they might involve in sexual affairs or they might face sexual violence at night especially. And the third aspect that I am showing here is doctor's treatment. Let's look at this aspect. Some parts of the body which are linked to reproduction and sexual health are called private parts. Girls as well as boys, means both girls and boys, in some cases are meant to feel shy about those parts. About those parts means those private parts. What are the private parts? Some parts of the body that are linked to reproduction and sexual health are called private parts. Girls and boys in some cases are meant to feel shy about these private parts. So, whenever there are some health issues in these private parts, girls especially feel shy to show them to doctors. Even boys feel shy to show them to doctors. And this shy feeling is more in girls. So normally such issues remain hidden only. So because of the shy feeling or because of the fear that something will happen, they will hide these health issues, especially that happen to the private parts. So because of this, the health will degrade more if they hide the issues, right? But nowadays, this issue is sorted to 50 to 60%. But still, so that is what I am mentioning, that gender sensitization is not achieved to 100%. It is yet to be achieved in complete manner. So now we can say that in certain issues it is achieved more than 90%, in certain issues 50 to 60%. So in overall we can say up to 60% it is achieved. So still 40% is yet to be achieved. And let's look the conclusion in the difference between food and sexuality. So let's conclude now. Feeding means with food. Feeding with food ensures the survival of the individual, whereas the sexual activity ensures the survival of the species. Species means their heredity, continuation of the species. So it will endure, sexual activity endures the survival of the species, whereas the feeding means food endures the survival of the individual person only, either male or female. Okay, so feeding endures the survival of the individual, whereas sexual activity endures the survival of the species, whole species. Means only through sexual activities the species will be continued to produce. So that is why the difference is given in this way. Feeding ensures survival of the individual only, whereas sexual activity or sexuality ensures the survival of the species, whole species. So beyond biology, making love and eating means, making love means a kind of sexuality, eating means food. These two share psychological attributes as two of life's greatest pleasures. So what are the two here? These two only, food and sexuality. So beyond biology, making love means sexuality and eating means food. These two share psychological attributes as two of life's greatest pleasures. Okay. Both food and sex can provide a sense of nurturing, means caring, comfort, being loved, and instant gratification. So what is the meaning of this sentence? Both food and sex can provide sense of nurturing, sense of comfort, sense of being loved, and instant gratification. So these are the things that will be provided by both food as well as sex. Paradoxically means otherwise. So one kind of contradiction, in contradiction. The two means food and sex. Drives can also be the source of much psychological conflict. They are also the sources of much psychological conflict, much guilt feeling, and much shame. So, this is the conclusion for the differences between food as well as sexuality. So, similarities also we have seen. Food and sexuality share psychological attributes as two of life's greatest pleasures. And these two provide a sense of nurturing, comfort, being loved, and instant gratification. And in contradiction, these two can also be the source of much psychological conflict, guilt, and shame. So, that is the conclusion between the content difference between food and sexuality. And the references that I have followed are a book by Kadambari for gender studies and a book by Rajalakshmi Kalyan for gender sensitization. Thank you very much for your kind attention.